I knew something was wrong the moment my brakes gave out. Not a slow leak. Not some random mechanical failure. This was sabotage, deliberate, personal. And the man who did it lived just 200 feet from my front door. My name's Ethan, and 15 years ago, my wife and I traded city noise for quiet country life. Or so we thought. We bought a little home in the rolling hills outside Cedar Ridge, North Carolina. A fresh start. We wanted peace, stars at night, and the kind of life where neighbors wave, not gossip. At first, that's exactly what we got. Our nearest neighbors, Tom and Brenda Dawson, lived across the gravel road. The sort of people who collect old lawn ornaments and talk about the good old days a little too often. They seemed fine enough. Country folk, loud but friendly. Then everything changed. My wife, Lauren, got pregnant a year after we moved in. It was supposed to be the happiest time of our lives. Crib shopping, naming lists, those little kicks at night that make you feel like the universe just smiled on you. But pregnancy also comes with stress, fatigue, and emotions that run wild. And one evening, after a long, hot summer day, Lauren's patience snapped. She'd filled the bathtub, sank into the warm water, and tried to finally relax her swollen feet. Outside, though, the Dawsons' massive hound, a slobbering, ear-splitting beast named Bear, decided that was the perfect time to bark. And bark, and bark. 30 minutes. 45. Nearly an hour. She tried to tune it out. She tried humming. Then she tried holding her ears underwater. But when you're exhausted, hormonal, and 8 months pregnant, even the smallest thing can feel like the world collapsing. Lauren exploded. She stormed out onto the porch in her bathrobe, dripping wet and furious, and shouted across the field, "Tom, get your dog to stop barking. Please." There was silence for maybe 5 seconds. Then, faintly through the summer air, Tom yelled back, "It's the country lady. Dogs bark." She slammed the door, humiliated and shaking. And that, as it turns out, was the spark that lit a year-long war. At first, it was petty. The Dawsons renamed their Wi-Fi network. And yes, I'm not joking, to "I love barking dogs." We laughed it off. Country humor, right? But then it got darker. One morning, I came home from a business trip and saw Lauren crouched in the driveway picking up small pieces of metal. Her eyes were red. She looked up at me and said quietly, "They threw these here." I walked over and realized what I was looking at. Makeshift tire spikes, nails twisted together with wire. Not the kind you just find lying around. Someone made them. Someone wanted to puncture my tires. Or worse, make me lose control on the dirt road leading out of our property. That was the first time I felt something deep and cold settle in my stomach. Not anger, not yet. Something else. A promise. The next day, I found out just how far Tom was willing to go. I left for work early, the sun barely rising, fog rolling over the fields. My truck rumbled down the gravel road, and everything seemed fine. But a few miles later, merging onto the interstate, I pressed the brakes, and the pedals sank to the floor. No pressure, no resistance, just the awful, weightless realization that I couldn't stop. Instinct kicked in. I downshifted, pumped the emergency brake, and steered into a truck stop lot. By some miracle, I didn't hit anyone. My heart was pounding like I'd just outrun death itself. I got out, popped the hood, and started checking things over. Then I saw it, a thin line of fluid trailing down from the front right caliper. And the bleeder valve was loose. Not loose like, oops, a mechanic forgot. Loose like someone turned it on purpose. Brake fluid drained out overnight. Meaning when I pulled out that morning, I was one stop sign away from disaster. That's when rage hit. Hot, clear, and sharp. I wasn't going to call the sheriff. I wasn't going to confront Tom and Brenda and give them the satisfaction of another yelling match. No, if he wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. I work in IT, cybersecurity, to be specific. I break into systems for a living, legally, of course. But that night, I decided to make an exception. I dug out an old laptop from my office closet, dusty, slow, but perfect for what I had in mind. I loaded up a custom operating system designed for penetration testing, the kind of software hackers use to test firewalls. Then I scanned the local networks. It didn't take long. I love barking dogs, popped right up, full signal strength. Their Wi-Fi password, Bear123. I laughed out loud. Within 10 minutes, I was inside. Their shared folders, their printer queue, their browser history, all open doors waiting for a visitor. I started simple. I printed a few things on their wireless printer. Nothing crazy at first, just random quotes about karma, patience, and keeping quiet dogs. Then I got creative. I found a few personal emails between Brenda and her sister. Nothing scandalous, but enough detail to make what came next convincing. So I wrote a letter. An email, formatted perfectly to look like it came from another woman. Flirty, familiar, full of little personal touches. Then I printed it directly to their printer at 3:14 a.m. I can only imagine the look on Brenda's face when she found it. But I wasn't done. The next week, I took it further. There's a website for inmates seeking pen pals, real people behind bars looking for companionship. I signed up Brenda using her full name and address. And in the About Me section, I wrote, married, lonely, husband works construction, 3 kids, 2 dogs, looking for a friend who understands. I even sent the first letter myself, pretending to be her, handwritten, polite, sprinkled with just enough truth to sound real. Then I waited. 2 weeks later, a large envelope arrived at their mailbox. I know because I watched from my porch, coffee in hand, as Brenda walked down their gravel path, opened it, and froze. Tom came out a few minutes later. There was yelling, hands waving. Then he snatched the letter and stormed inside. I don't know what happened in that house, but I do know this. After that day, Bear stopped barking. And so did they. For days, our property was silent. No barking, no snide Wi-Fi names, no tire spikes waiting in the gravel, just peace. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking up to some new act of malice from across the road. But the thing about revenge, the real, quiet kind, is that it doesn't end with fireworks. It seeps in slowly. It changes how you look at everything. At first, I kept waiting for Tom to retaliate. Every night, I'd glance out the window before bed, making sure our motion lights were working. I double-checked the locks, even installed security cameras hidden in the trees. I expected shouting, confrontation, maybe even more sabotage. Instead, all I got was silence. Cold, heavy silence. A week after that letter incident, I saw Tom in town for the first time. He was at the hardware store, grabbing some kind of tool. Normally, he'd be loud, joking with the clerks, waving his hands, being the kind of man who loved attention. But not that day. That day, he looked small. He kept his head down, didn't make eye contact, and when he finally noticed me near the counter, his face froze. I just smiled, polite and calm, and said, "Mornin', Tom." He grunted, paid, and left. That was the moment I knew he had no idea what I'd done, only that his world was unraveling in ways he couldn't explain. Brenda, on the other hand, became almost invisible. Before, she'd stand on her porch gossiping on the phone or yelling at their kids. Now, she barely stepped outside. The once loud, laughing, chaotic household across the road had gone eerily still. Lauren noticed it too. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch watching the sun dip behind the pines, she said softly, "You think they're okay?" I sipped my coffee and pretended to think it over. "I think they're finally minding their own business," I said. She chuckled, but there was a hint of unease in her voice. "I just hope it's over." I didn't answer because part of me wasn't sure. Part of me wanted it to be over, yes, but another part of me felt something darker. Satisfaction. Power. When someone tries to take your peace, your safety, it changes you. You stop trusting, stop assuming the best. You learn that even in a quiet country town, people can be venom-wrapped in friendliness. Still, life moved on. Lauren gave birth to our son, Jack, a few months later, healthy, loud, and perfect. The Dawsons sent a small card that said, "Congratulations." No note, no signature, just that one word typed on a white card. I stared at it for a long time before tossing it in the trash. The following year passed quietly. Our house became a home. Toys in the yard, new paint, a swing under the oak tree. And while I never stopped watching our borders, the driveway, the fence line, there were no more signs of trouble. But then, one winter morning, something strange happened. I got an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name typed neatly on the front. Inside was a printed email, one of my own. An old message I'd sent from my anonymous account to print on their Wi-Fi printer, the fake affair letter I'd created. Except this copy had notes scrawled in red pen around the edges. Furious handwriting, all capital letters. "We know this was you. Stay away from my family." My hands went cold. They'd figured it out. For a split second, I felt the same adrenaline rush I'd felt the day my brakes failed. Except this time, I wasn't the one being hunted. I was the one who'd left the trail. I folded the paper, locked it in my desk drawer, and said nothing to Lauren. No good could come from that conversation. But over the next few weeks, I started noticing things again. Not dangerous, not like before, but subtle. Our mailbox got knocked down. Someone dumped a bag of leaves and garbage near our gate. And one morning, all the solar lights along our driveway were smashed. No notes, no confrontation, just quiet spite. I wanted to react. Oh, I wanted to so badly. But this time I didn't. Because that's the thing about revenge, it's addictive. You think you're in control, but the truth is, you start feeding off the chaos. And eventually, it consumes everything, including you. So instead, I did the hardest thing imaginable. I stopped. I fixed the lights, replaced the mailbox, and when I passed Tom's truck in town, I gave a friendly wave. You could see the confusion on his face. That slow, twitchy uncertainty of a man who doesn't know whether the person across from him is an enemy or a ghost. Time passed. We lived there another 6 years before moving closer to the city for better schools. By then, the Dawsons' property had fallen into disrepair. Tom's old truck sat rusting in the yard, the paint peeling from the house, and the "Beware of Dogs" sign still hanging, though Bear had been gone for years. When we finally loaded up the moving truck, I looked across the field one last time. Tom was sitting on his porch, staring at nothing. For a long moment, I thought about walking over, shaking his hand, maybe even forgiving him. But I didn't. Some things are better left as unfinished business. Because the truth is, I never wanted revenge for revenge's sake. I wanted peace. And once I realized I already had it, I didn't need anything else. These days, I tell this story rarely. Partly because it sounds unbelievable, and partly because it reminds me that sometimes justice doesn't come from the law or even from confrontation. It comes from balance. From knowing you survived what they tried to take from you and walked away stronger. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, pushed by someone's cruelty, tempted to strike back, remember this. Revenge doesn't always have to burn. Sometimes it just needs to quietly outlast. And I promise you, silence, in the end, can be the loudest victory of all. Years later, long after the dust of that small-town feud had settled, I found myself driving back down the old country road that once defined a chapter of my life I rarely spoke about. It was one of those still afternoons when the air carries a kind of memory. The sun hung low, filtering through the pine trees in soft gold streaks, and every bump in the gravel beneath my tires felt like a heartbeat from the past. My son, Jack, now a tall 17-year-old with a deep voice and his mother's quiet kindness, sat beside me scrolling on his phone. He didn't really understand why I wanted to take this detour. To him, this place was just a blurry memory from early childhood, a swing, a porch, and wide-open fields. But to me, this road was everything. Peace, fear, anger, redemption, all wrapped into one stretch of dirt and dust. "Dad," he said, glancing up. "You okay? You've been quiet." I smiled. "Just remembering." He turned his gaze to the window. "This is where you used to live." "Yeah, before you started school." We slowed as we approached the old turnoff, the wooden sign still hanging crooked from one chain. Hollow Creek Lane. The house appeared around the bend like a ghost that hadn't realized it was dead. The paint had faded to a chalky gray. The porch sagged. The yard that once smelled of fresh grass was overrun with weeds. I parked by the gate and just sat there. For a long time. "Didn't you say this place was nice?" Jack asked, half grinning. I laughed quietly. "It was. Once." The truth was, I hadn't planned this stop for nostalgia. I'd heard from an old friend online that Tom Dawson had passed away the previous spring. A heart attack, sudden and quiet. Brenda had sold the property shortly after, moving somewhere closer to her grown kids. There was no triumph in hearing that, just finality. Like the last line of a book you never meant to finish. Jack opened his door and stepped out. The crunch of gravel under his shoes echoed the same sound I'd heard 1,000 times, walking that driveway years ago. He walked up to the old fence line, brushed his hand along the splintered wood, and looked back. "This is where you taught me to ride a bike." I nodded. "Right there. You kept veering toward the ditch." He laughed. "Sounds about right." I got out too, leaning against the hood of the truck. The air smelled like summer dust and pine sap. For a moment, I could almost see Lauren standing on the porch again, holding baby Jack, waving as I came up the road. I could hear Bear barking across the field. I could even picture Tom, beer in hand, yelling something half pleasant, half pointed. But those were ghosts now. And unlike before, they didn't stir anger in me, just distance. Jack joined me by the truck, curious. "So why'd we move away? You never said much." I looked at him for a long moment. "Let's just say, not all neighbors are friendly." He smirked. "Did you guys fight or something?" I thought about that night when I almost died on the interstate. The hiss of the brake line, the moment the pedal hit the floor. I thought about the old laptop glowing in the dark, the hum of a printer 200 feet away. And I thought about the letter, the red scrawl that said, "We know this was you." Something like that, I said finally. He leaned on the hood beside me. "Guess it worked out, though? You and Mom always seem calm, like nothing ever gets to you." That caught me off guard. I hadn't realized it showed. "Yeah," I said softly. "We had to learn that." He nodded and looked out at the horizon. "I hope I'm like that someday." I smiled. "You will be. Just remember something, Jack. Peace doesn't always come easy. Sometimes you have to fight for it. And sometimes, the best fight is the one you walk away from." He didn't answer right away, just kept watching the trees sway in the wind. I think he understood. We got back in the truck and started heading home. As the old house disappeared in the rearview mirror, I felt a strange mix of gratitude and relief. Not joy, not revenge, just a sense that life had balanced itself out. Before we turned back onto the highway, Jack pointed toward a rusted mailbox still standing by the side of the road. The paint was almost gone, but the faint outline of the name was still visible. "Dawson." "Who lived there?" he asked. I let out a quiet breath. "Neighbors. Not the best kind." He grinned. "You think they miss you?" I chuckled. "If they do, I hope it's quiet." He laughed, rolled down the window, and let the wind whip through the cab as the road opened up ahead of us. As the trees gave way to the highway, I realized something that had taken me nearly 15 years to learn. The sweetest revenge isn't payback. It isn't the schemes, the secrets, or the small victories that keep you up at night replaying old grudges. It's this, the calm that comes after. The family is still intact. The peace you built from ashes. That's what they could never touch. That's what survived. Have you ever noticed how some people mistake kindness for weakness? I used to. I used to think being decent meant letting things slide. Letting people talk, disrespect, push boundaries, cross lines, and still smiling, because it's not worth it. But standing in that old driveway all those years later, I realized something. The moment you let someone walk all over you, they start to think it's their right to keep walking. And some folks, they'll only learn the hard way. People like Tom Dawson. I can still picture his smug grin the day we moved in. How he offered that fake neighborly handshake that already said, "I run things around here." He had no idea what kind of man I really was. See, I'm not violent. Never have been. But I do believe in balance. The universe doesn't always take care of that by itself. Sometimes, you have to help it along. So when he messed with my family, when his stupidity nearly cost me my life, I didn't lose sleep. I didn't go shouting or calling the cops. I just adapted. A man like me doesn't raise his voice. He rewires the situation. And that's what I did. Quietly. Precisely. Thoroughly. Years have passed, but every time I think about it, I don't feel guilt. I feel control. I feel like the balance was restored. Because here's the truth most people won't say out loud. Some folks deserve the weight of their own actions to crush them. The Dawsons did. Now, I'm not saying what I did was right in every moral sense. Maybe it wasn't. But it was fair. And sometimes, fair and right aren't the same thing. Lauren still doesn't know all the details. She thinks the whole thing just faded out, that the neighbors finally backed off. Maybe that's for the best. She got her peace. And Jack grew up safe, with parents who taught him to defend what matters without ever needing to raise a hand. But me? I sleep well. Always have. Because I know exactly how far I'm willing to go when someone threatens my family. And the next time someone looks at me with that same kind of smugness, that assumption that I'm just another quiet man who'll keep the peace, I smile. Because they don't know. They don't know that the quiet ones are usually the ones who've already seen what happens when you push too far. So yeah, maybe revenge doesn't solve everything. But it sure does remind people to think twice before they start barking at the wrong door. It is sweetest revenge. And sometimes, peace isn't given. Sometimes, it's earned, one calculated act at a time.